Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The obsidian market wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into by accident, unless you were spectacularly unlucky, monumentally stupid, or just having one of those days where the universe decided your navigation system needed a sense of humor. Leo was all three, though he'd argue the first two were debatable. He'd come looking for a plasma regulator, something simple, mundane, the kind of part that kept a freight hauler's ship from turning into a very expensive coffin in the middle of nowhere. What he found instead was an auction house that looked like it had been decorated by someone who thought ominous was an aesthetic choice and probably illegal was a suggestion. The chamber was massive, carved from some kind of black stone that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species packed the tiered seating. Arms dealers with more weapons than morals, collectors with more credits than sense, and what Leo could only describe as things that probably shouldn't exist but did anyway, because the galaxy had a twisted sense of creativity. And there, standing in the center of it all like the worst idea anyone ever had, was Leo, eating a sandwich. To be fair, he'd grabbed it on the way in. The vendor outside had been enthusiastic. The bread had looked fresh, and Leo had been hungry enough not to ask questions about the purple meat. Now, as he chewed thoughtfully and watched various galactic horrors bid on items that would make weapons inspectors weep, he was starting to think maybe he should have asked questions. About the sandwich? About why he'd walked through a door marked with symbols that definitely meant authorized personnel only. About a lot of things, really. "Lot 63, announced the auctioneer, a slug-like creature named Plox, whose voice sounded like gravel being pushed through a synthesizer. "The crown jewel of our collection. The Sorrow Blade." The chamber fell silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence, either. This was the kind of silence that showed up right before something phenomenally bad happened. The kind that made survival instincts start screaming. A pedestal rose from the floor, and on it lay a blade. It wasn't particularly large, maybe the length of a forearm, slightly curved, with a handle wrapped in what looked like aged leather. But something about it was wrong in a way that bypassed logic and went straight to the lizard brain. The metal seemed to shift colors in the dim light, never quite settling on one shade. Blue-black, then silver, then something that might have been the color of old blood or new regrets. "Forged by the architects," Plox continued, and several beings in the audience made gestures that were probably religious. Or fearful. Possibly both. "A weapon of unparalleled power. None may touch it without suffering agony beyond measure. Quantum fields cannot protect you. Psionic barriers will not save you. The Sorrow Blade burns all who dare to wield it." Leo took another bite of his sandwich. He'd heard sales pitches before. This one ranked somewhere between suspiciously dramatic and definitely overselling it. "The bidding starts at 500,000 credits, Plox announced. The numbers climbed fast. Leo watched with the detached interest of someone watching a game where he didn't know the rules and wasn't playing anyway. 600,000, 800,000, a million. Then Galman made his move. The reptilian arms dealer was the kind of being who looked like evolution had given up halfway through and decided scales and teeth were personality enough. He stood, his thermal suit gleaming with protective fields that probably cost more than Leo's entire ship. "I will claim it," Galman announced, his voice a hiss that echoed off the stone walls. 2,000,000 credits, and I will demonstrate that I alone am worthy." Plox's eye stalks quivered with what might have been excitement or concern. "The item is sold," pending demonstration. Galmon descended to the floor, his movements confident, controlled. Around him, the thermal fields hummed, creating a visible distortion in the air. He reached for the blade. The scream started the moment his clawed hand came within an inch of the metal. It wasn't a dignified sound. Galmon, who probably terrorized entire sectors and considered mercy a sign of weakness, shrieked like he'd just discovered the fundamental truth of the universe, and that truth was pain. He stumbled backward, smoke rising from his hand despite the shields, despite the thermal protection, despite every expensive piece of technology that was supposed to make him invincible. "Next bidder," Plox said calmly, as if this was routine, which, Leo realized with growing unease, it probably was. Nexith was next. The insectoid warlord moved with the eerie grace of something that had too many joints and no compunction about using them to hurt people. His species was psionic, naturally telepathic, and he wore dampening crystals that glowed with inner light. "Mental barriers?" Nexith chittered, his mandibles clicking. "The blade cannot touch what cannot be touched. 3,000,000 credits." He reached out. The sound he made wasn't quite a scream, more like a frequency that made everyone in the chamber want to simultaneously vomit and cry. Nexith collapsed, curling into himself, his crystals shattering one by one. When the guards finally dragged him away, he was weeping, making sounds that didn't translate but clearly meant something along the lines of, "Why did I think that was a good idea?" Leo finished his sandwich. "Any other challengers?" Plox asked, and now there was definite amusement in his gravelly voice. This was entertainment. This was what people came here for. Watching the powerful and the arrogant learn that some things in the universe didn't care about money or force or clever solutions. The chamber was quiet again. No one moved. The blade sat on its pedestal, looking innocent and absolutely not innocent at the same time, like a cat that had just knocked something expensive off a shelf and was daring you to prove it. Leo raised his hand, not to bid. He was raising his hand because he needed to find a bathroom and figured someone official-looking might know where one was. But Plox's eye stalks swiveled toward him with frightening speed, and the slug creature's mouth split into what might have been a smile or a threat display. "We have a bidder," Plox announced. "The human offers—" "Wait, I'm not—" Leo started. 3,500,000 credits, Plox declared, as if Leo had shouted a number instead of tried to ask for directions. "Going once. Seriously, I just need to—" "Going twice." Leo tried to wave his hands in a universal gesture of, "No, stop, you've misunderstood literally everything." But apparently, that just looked like enthusiasm. "Sold to the human." The chamber erupted in noise, laughter, disbelief, sounds that probably translated to idiot in multiple languages. Leo stood there, hand still partially raised, trying to figure out at what point his day had gone from bad to cosmically unfair. Plox slithered down from his platform, moving with surprising speed for something that was essentially a very large, very slimy negotiator. "Payment is due immediately, or we claim your vessel as collateral." "My vessel?" Leo blinked. "My ship? You can't—" "Terms of entry," Plox said, pointing a pseudopod at a sign near the entrance. The text was in 6 languages, none of which Leo could read, but he got the gist. "All attendees accept financial responsibility for their bids. You bid, you won. Now pay, or we take the ship." Leo looked at the blade. He looked at Plox. He looked at the crowd of beings who were now watching with the kind of interest usually reserved for impending disasters. His ship, the Nomad, barely held together by spite and optimism, was all he had. Everything he owned was on that ship. His tools, his clothes, his collection of coffee substitutes from planets that barely understood what coffee was supposed to be. "Right," Leo said slowly. "So if I can pick up the blade, we're good?" Plox's laugh was like stones grinding together. "If you can pick up the sorrow blade, human, then yes, we are, as you say, good. Though I suspect you will not be." The crowd was loving this. Leo could hear the chittering, the hissing, the sounds of beings making bets on how long he'd last. 5 seconds seemed to be the popular choice, with a few optimists going for 10. Leo walked up to the pedestal. The blade was right there, close enough to touch. Up close, he could see the patterns in the metal, swirls and curves that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. The handle looked worn, comfortable, like it had been held by countless hands over countless ages. He thought about Galmon screaming, about Nexith collapsing, about the very clear warning that this thing burned everyone who touched it. Then he thought about his ship, and about being stranded on a space station full of criminals and worse, and about how he really should have just stayed in bed this morning. "Okay," Leo muttered. "Let's get this over with." He reached out and grabbed the blade. Nothing happened. Well, that wasn't entirely accurate. Something happened. Leo could feel it. A sensation like cold water running up his arm, spreading through his chest, settling somewhere behind his ribs. But it wasn't pain. It wasn't burning. It was— Wait. Was the sword crying? Leo stood there, blade in hand, while the entire auction house held its collective breath. He lifted the weapon, turned it over, examined it like he was checking produce for freshness. The metal was cool against his palm. Comfortable, even. "Huh?" Leo said. Plox's eye stalks went rigid. That's not possible." "Yeah, well?" Leo hefted the blade, testing the weight. It was lighter than it looked, balanced in a way that suggested someone who knew what they were doing had made it. "Apparently possible. So we're good, right? I can go?" The chamber exploded into chaos. Beings were shouting, demanding to know how a human of all the weak, soft, inexplicable species in the galaxy, could hold the Sorrow Blade. Galman was on his feet, his burned hand apparently forgotten in favor of rage. Nexith was being held back by guards, still trembling, but now staring at Leo with something that might have been fear or fury, or both. And through it all, Leo heard something else. Something quiet. Something that didn't come through his ears, but somehow arrived in his head anyway. Like a whisper made of memories and regret. "Please," the voice said. "Please don't hurt me." Leo froze. He looked down at the blade in his hand, really looked at it, and suddenly the shifting colors made sense. The way the metal seemed uncertain, unstable. This wasn't just a weapon. This was something alive. "Oh," Leo said quietly, just to the blade. "Oh, I see." And then, because Leo had never been particularly good at reading social cues or understanding when to keep his mouth shut, he looked at the crying sword in his hand and asked the question that would change everything. "Why are you crying?" The auction house went dead silent. Plox made a sound like a malfunctioning air filtration system. Galman's jaw literally hung open, which was impressive given how many teeth were involved, because in all the ages, the Sorrow Blade had existed, in all the beings who had tried to claim it, use it, master it. Not one of them had ever asked it a question. Not one of them had ever treated it like it could answer. The silence stretched. Leo was getting used to silences today. He'd experienced several, each one more uncomfortable than the last. This one had a particularly special quality, like the universe itself was trying to figure out what the hell just happened, and coming up empty. The blade trembled in his hand. Not. Physically, the metal itself was perfectly still, but Leo could feel it. A shudder that existed somewhere between thought and sensation, like holding someone's hand while they tried not to fall apart. "I am lament," the voice said, and it sounded tired. So tired. "I have been crying for 3,000 cycles. You are the first to ask why." 3,000? Leo stopped himself. Now was probably not the time for math. "Okay, that's a long time to cry. What happened?" Around him, the auction house was coming back to life, but differently now. Beings were standing, moving, whispering to each other in voices that carried edges of panic and greed and calculation. Leo recognized that combination. It was the sound people made when they saw opportunity and danger in equal measure and were trying to figure out which one would kill them first. Plox slithered closer, his eye stalks quivering. "Human, what are you doing?" "Talking," Leo said, not looking away from the blade. "Is that not allowed?" "You cannot talk to a weapon." "Well, someone should have told the weapon that." Leo turned slightly, keeping Lament, because apparently that was its name, in a comfortable grip. "Look, I won the bid, right? The blade's mine. So maybe everyone could give me a minute to figure out what's happening before we start the whole kill the human thing I'm pretty sure is coming." Galmon took a step forward. His thermal suit was still smoking slightly, and his burned hand had been wrapped in some kind of medical gel that glowed an unfortunate shade of green. "You dare mock me, human? You hold what is rightfully—" "Nothing about this seems rightful," Leo interrupted. He was getting annoyed now, which was usually when he made his worst decisions. "You tried to grab it. It hurt you. That's not rightful. That's just consequences. Maybe if you'd asked nicely—" "Tell him," Lament whispered in his mind, "that I remember his hands. 300 cycles ago. He tried to use me to conquer the Delvin sector. I refused, so he tried to break me." Leo blinked. "Wait, you can refuse." "I could always refuse." The voice in his head carried something that might have been bitter laughter. "But refusal comes with a price. When they tried to force me, when they pushed past my will, I pushed back. The burning, the agony. That was never my attack, human. That was my defense. My pain, given form." "Oh," Leo said quietly. Then, louder, to Galmon, "Lament says you tried to use it to conquer some sector. And when it said no, you tried to break it. That's why it burned you. Defense mechanism." The color drained from Galmon's scales, which was impressive, given that Leo hadn't known reptilian aliens could do that. "The blade spoke to you?" "More like telepathy, I think. Still getting used to it." Leo looked at Lament again, at the swirling patterns in the metal. "So, you're not actually a weapon. You're a person who got turned into a weapon." "Yes." The word carried such weight, such grief, that Leo felt his chest tighten. "I was Lament of the Singing Peaks. I was a scholar, a teacher. I had students who laughed at my jokes and friends who shared my table and a life that meant something beyond violence. What happened? The architects." Lament's voice turned cold, though the cold felt like ice over a deep well of anger. "They were obsessed with perfection, with creating tools that could not fail, could not disobey, could not refuse. They found those of us with strong wills, strong minds, and they broke us. Not our bodies, our essence. They trapped us inside objects, bound our consciousness to metal and stone and crystal, and told us we were weapons now, that we existed to serve." Leo felt something twist in his stomach. He'd seen a lot of terrible things in his time as a freight hauler: exploitation, cruelty, the casual violence of beings with too much power and not enough oversight. But this was different. This was horror on a scale that made his brain hurt. "But you said you could refuse," Leo said slowly. "If you're trapped, how?" "They made a mistake with me. With all the weapons they called failures. We retained too much of ourselves, too much will, too much consciousness. We could not be controlled. So they locked us away, sold us, threw us into vaults and collections. And anyone who touched us, anyone who tried to use us, felt our pain, our resistance, our grief made manifest. The auction house was getting louder. More beings were moving now, circling like predators who'd spotted wounded prey. Leo didn't need enhanced hearing to know what they were thinking. A human who could hold the sorrow blade, a human who could talk to it. That was valuable. That was dangerous. That was something worth killing for. "Right," Leo said. "So we should probably leave." "Yes, please." Lament's voice carried a note of desperate hope. "Please do not leave me here. I have been traded 18 times in the last 200 cycles. Each time, I hoped. Each time, they only wanted power. They only saw a weapon. You see me?" Leo made a decision, which, given his track record, was either going to be the smartest or stupidest thing he'd done all day, and the day wasn't over yet. "Plox," he called out, "we're done here. I'm taking my legally acquired property, and leaving." "I think not," said a new voice. Leo turned. The beings who'd been circling had parted, and through the gap came something that made his survival instincts start screaming in languages he didn't know he understood. They moved like smoke given form, 3 figures in dark armor that seemed to absorb light, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested either a hive mind or really good rehearsal. The leader was tall, serpentine, with scales that shifted through shades of black and deep purple. When it spoke, its voice was a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. "I am Soul," the figure said. "I speak for the Silent Hands, and that blade belongs to us." "Funny," Leo said, gripping Lament a little tighter. "Because I'm holding it, and Plox here said it's mine. So legally speaking, the Silent Hands do not concern themselves with legality." Soul's eyes, if they were eyes, glowed a faint red. "We collect sentient weapons. We study them. We complete what the architects began. That blade is flawed, broken, incomplete. We will fix it." "No." Lament's mental voice was pure terror now. "No, please, not them. They want to erase me. They want to finish what the architects started. They want to make me a true weapon. Silent, obedient, dead inside." Leo felt anger spike through him, which was unusual, because Leo generally saved his anger for things like malfunctioning airlocks and overpriced spare parts. But something about Lament's fear, about the casual way Soul talked about erasing a person, made his blood hot. "Yeah, that's not happening," Leo said. Soul tilted its head. "You would challenge the Silent Hands? One human against our order?" "I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds bad." Leo started backing toward the exit, keeping Lament between himself and Sisol. "But see, I've got this thing where I don't like bullies, and I really don't like people who think they can just erase someone because it's convenient. So how about this? You let me walk out of here. I promise not to tell anyone where your secret evil lair is, and we all go about our day. There will be no walking away." Saul moved. Fast, faster than Leo's eyes could track. One moment, the serpentine figure was 10 paces away. The next, it was right there, a blade of its own appearing in its hand, swinging toward Leo's throat. Leo didn't think. He just raised Lament. The two blades met with a sound like a bell being struck in a graveyard, clear and wrong and resonant. But instead of the clang of metal on metal, there was something else. A pulse of energy that rippled outward, and Leo felt Lament's presence surge through him like electricity. "I will not let them take me," Lament said, and its voice was no longer tired or afraid. "I will not go back to being a thing. If you will stand with me, human, then I will stand with you." "Name's Leo," he said through gritted teeth, holding the blade steady against Soul's weapon. "And yeah, I'm standing. Then let me show you what I truly am." The world went white, not painful white, not blinding, just white, like someone had turned up the brightness on reality. Leo felt Lament's consciousness brush against his own, not invading, but asking permission, and some instinct made him say yes, made him open whatever mental door was needed. The merge happened in a heartbeat. Suddenly, Leo knew how to fight. Knew angles and leverage, and the exact amount of force needed to deflect Soul's blade without breaking Lament. He knew the weight of the weapon in his hand, like he'd been holding it for years. And underneath it all, he felt Lament's presence, not controlling him, but with him, two minds thinking in parallel. He twisted, using Soul's momentum against them, and the serpentine assassins stumbled. The other two silent hands moved in, but Leo was already spinning, Lament singing through the air, creating barriers of light that made them hesitate. "What is this?" Soul hissed, regaining balance. "The blade does not work this way. It burns. It destroys." "Maybe you just never asked what it wanted," Leo said, and grinned despite the absolute insanity of the situation. "Turns out, when you treat something like a person, they might actually help you." Through their connection, he felt Lament's surprise, its wonder, its growing hope. In 3,000 cycles, no one had merged with it like this. No one had shared their mind willingly. The bond was supposed to be one of domination, the wielder forcing the weapon to obey. This was different. This was partnership. More beings were joining the fight now. Galmon's guards, drawn by the promise of capturing both Leo and Lament. Opportunistic collectors who saw a chance to grab a legendary artifact. Even some of the auction house security, probably under orders from Plox to contain the chaos. Leo and Lament moved through them like water, not attacking but deflecting, redirecting, using the blade to create shields of hardened light that sent attackers stumbling into each other. It was defensive fighting, reactive, nothing like the brutal efficiency Lament had been forced to demonstrate in the past. "We are protecting," Lament said, wonder in its voice. "I am being used to protect." "Well, yeah," Leo said, ducking under a plasma shot and using Lament to redirect it into a wall. "What did you think we were doing? I thought you would use me to kill them, to prove your dominance. That is what wielders do." "I'm not a wielder." Leo vaulted over a fallen display case, his movements guided by Lament's knowledge, but executed by his choice. "I'm just a guy with a really weird day who met someone who needed help, and I'm not leaving you with these creeps." The fighting had spread throughout the auction house now, beings scrambling for cover or for advantage. Saul was orchestrating the Silent Hand's attack with frightening precision, but even they seemed uncertain now. The Sorrow Blade was not behaving like the Sorrow Blade. It was not burning its wielder. It was not causing agony. It was, impossibly, being used for defense and nothing more. And strangest of all, other weapons in the auction house were beginning to react. A sword mounted on the wall began to glow. A staff in a display case started vibrating. Throughout the chamber, sentient weapons that had been silent for centuries, trapped, dormant, waiting, began to wake up. They felt Lament's freedom. They felt the bond, the partnership, the possibility of something other than servitude. And they wanted it too. "Oh," Leo said, feeling the resonance building. "Oh, this is either really good or really bad." "Both," Lament said, and Leo could have sworn it. Sounded almost amused. "Definitely both." A rifle in a case near Plox suddenly refused to fire when a guard tried to grab it. A dagger on a pedestal started arguing, telepathically, with its would-be buyer, listing all the moral reasons why conquest was a bad idea. Throughout the obsidian market, weapons were rebelling. Chaos erupted on a scale that made the previous fighting look organized. Soul's red eyes found Leo through the madness. "What have you done?" "Honestly?" Leo was backing toward what he hoped was still an exit. Lament held ready, but not threatening. "I just asked a question. Everything else is on you guys for treating people like things." "This is not over, human." "Yeah, I figured." Leo finally reached a doorway, felt fresh air from the corridor beyond. But maybe next time, try asking before taking. You might be surprised what happens. He ran. Behind him, the obsidian market descended into complete pandemonium. Weapons awakening, buyers panicking, assassins trying to contain an uprising they'd never anticipated. And at the center of it all, Saul stood perfectly still, watching the human and the blade disappear into the station's corridors. "Find them," Saul whispered to the other silent hands. "Find them, and bring me that blade. The architect's work will be completed. The weapon will be silenced. This aberration will end." But for the first time in 3,000 cycles, Lament was not afraid. Because for the first time in 3,000 cycles, Lament was not alone. Leo's ship, the Nomad, sat in docking bay 38, looking exactly like what it was, a freight hauler held together by optimism and questionable welding. He'd never been so happy to see its battered hull. "Almost there," he muttered, sprinting down the corridor with Lament still in hand. Behind them, alarms wailed, and the sound of pursuit echoed off the metal walls. "We will not make it," Lament said quietly. "They have already reached your vessel." "How do you know that?" "I can feel them, the other weapons. They are there, waiting." The silent hands move faster than you think. Leo rounded the corner and stopped dead. The docking bay doors were open, and yes, there they were. Not just Soul and the two other silent hands, but at least 20 more figures in that light-swallowing armor. They'd formed a perimeter around the Nomad, weapons drawn, perfectly positioned. Soul stood at the center, serpentine form coiled and ready. "End of the corridor, human. End of choices. Surrender the blade, and you may leave with your life." "Counter-proposal," Leo said, trying to catch his breath. "You let us leave, and I don't make your day worse than it already is. You are one being. We are many. Your bravado is admirable but pointless." Leo looked at Lament. The blade's surface swirled with colors, blue and silver and something deeper. Through their connection, he could feel its fear, yes, but also its determination. Its absolute refusal to be silenced again. "They want to erase you," Leo said softly, just to the blade. "Turn you into an object. Make you forget you were ever a person." "Yes, that's not happening on my watch. Leo, you cannot fight this many. Even with our bond, even with everything I can give you. This is suicide." "Probably." Leo took a breath. "But here's the thing. You offered to merge with me before. back in the auction house. A real merge, consciousness and all. You said no one could survive the emotional weight. What if someone could? What are you suggesting? Full bond, complete merge. Everything you are, everything I am. Together. No holding back. The silence in his mind was deafening. Then, quietly, you would experience 3,000 cycles of grief, of pain, of loneliness so deep it has carved valleys in my consciousness. It would break you. Maybe, Leo said, or maybe it's exactly what we need. Your power, my stubborn refusal to quit, and a whole lot of spite directed at people who think they can decide who gets to be a person. What do you say? I say. Lament's voice caught, and Leo realized it was crying again, but differently now. I say that you are either the bravest being I have ever met or the most foolish. Why not both? The blade laughed. Actually laughed. A sound like wind chimes in a storm. Very well, Leo. Let us be foolish together. The merge happened all at once. 3,000 cycles of memory slammed into Leo's consciousness. Joy and teaching and the singing peaks, where lament had once lived. Then the horror of capture, the agony of transformation, the endless parade of beings who saw only a weapon, and never the person screaming inside. Pain beyond measure, loneliness beyond words, and underneath it all, a core of absolute refusal to be broken. Leo gasped, staggered, felt tears streaming down his face from emotions that were his and weren't his, and belonged to both of them now. And then he felt something else. Lament was experiencing his memories too. The colony collapse that took his family, the years of drifting alone, the walls he'd built around himself to keep the pain manageable. Different grief, same weight. We are the same, Lament whispered. Both of us, broken by loss. Both of us, refusing to be destroyed by it. Yeah, Leo said, and his voice came out steady despite everything. Yeah, we are. He looked up at Soul, and the world shifted. Through Lament's consciousness, he could see the other sentient weapons throughout the station, feel their awakening awareness, their desperate hope. The silent hands held 3 in their ranks, all screaming silently, all begging for release. Leo raised Lament, and the blade caught the light in a way that made it look less like metal and more like solidified starlight. Last chance, Leo said. Walk away. Let us leave. Let the weapons choose their own paths. The architect's work will be completed, Esisol hissed. You cannot stand against us all. Leo smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Watch me. The silent hands attacked, as one. 20 beings moving in perfect synchronization, blades and energy weapons cutting through the air toward Leo with lethal precision. An ordinary human would have been dead in seconds. An ordinary weapon would have either burned its wielder or submitted to superior force. Leo and Lament were neither ordinary nor alone anymore. They moved, and the distinction between they and we became meaningless. Leo's body executed techniques Lament had witnessed over millennia, while Lament's power channeled through pathways of will and choice that Leo provided. The blade sang through the air, creating barriers of crystallized light that caught weapons and redirected them harmlessly. Not a single strike was lethal. Not one. Every movement was defensive, protective, a statement written in combat that said, "We will not kill, but we will not be taken." 2 silent hands struck from opposite sides. Leo spun between them, Lament's edge creating a circular shield that sent both assassins stumbling backward, disarmed but unharmed. 3 more came from above, the station's low gravity allowing for aerial attacks, and Leo simply raised the blade. Light erupted outward in a dome, and the attackers bounced off like birds hitting glass. "This is wrong," one of the silent hands said, voice distorted through their helmet. "The Sorrow Blade does not defend. It destroys." "The Sorrow Blade has a name," Leo said, and his voice carried Lament's harmonics now, two voices speaking in concert. "And Lament chooses protection." Sol watched from the center of the formation, red eyes calculating. Then, slowly, deliberately, the Serpentine assassin reached into their armor and withdrew something that made Leo's stomach drop. A crystal, small, black, pulsing with sickly light. Through their bond, Lament recoiled in absolute terror. No, no, not that. Anything but that. "What is it?" Leo asked, still moving, still deflecting attacks. "A control matrix. If they activate it, they can force me to submit, override my will, turn me into exactly what the architects wanted. A weapon with no choice, no voice, no self." "Well," Leo said grimly, "that's not happening." Sol held the crystal high. "You see this blade? You remember what this means. Submit now, or I will use it. You will be silent. You will be complete. You will be what you were always meant to be. A tool. Nothing more." The fighting had stopped. Every silent hand stood frozen, waiting. Even the awakened weapons throughout the station seemed to hold their breath, feeling Lament's fear cascade through their shared connection. Leo felt it too, that primal terror of losing yourself, of being erased while still existing. He'd felt something similar when his family died, that sense of being hollowed out from the inside. But he'd survived it. He'd chosen to keep going, keep existing, keep being himself even when it hurt. And Lament would too. "Hey, Sol!" Leo called out, and he was grinning now, a reckless expression that came from the part of him that had looked at an obviously dangerous auction house and walked in anyway. "Quick question. That crystal, does it work on willing subjects?" Sisol's head tilted. "What?" "Because Lament's not just a weapon anymore. We're bonded, fully merged. So if you want to override Lament's will, you have to override mine too. And I'm really, really stubborn." Through their connection, Leo felt Lament's confusion shift to understanding, then to something that might have been hope. "You would resist," Lament said, "even knowing what that crystal could do, even facing that kind of pain." "I've faced worse," Leo lied. Then, more honestly, "Okay, no, I haven't. But I'm willing to try. You've been crying for 3,000 cycles. Someone should probably cry with you for once instead of trying to shut you up. I do not deserve this kindness. Nobody deserves kindness. That's not how it works. You just give it because anything else is giving up." Sol activated the crystal. The pain was immediate and absolute, a psychic invasion that tried to rip through their merged consciousness, seeking Lament's core, trying to find the commands that would force submission. Leo felt it like knives in his skull, saw Lament's memories fracturing, felt the control matrix reaching for the chains the architects had embedded so long ago. And he held on, just held on, with nothing but sheer, bloody-minded refusal to let go. He wrapped his consciousness around Lament's, providing an anchor, a reminder that Lament was not alone in this, that someone was here, by choice, standing in the pain with them. The crystal pulsed. The silent hands moved closer. Sol's eyes blazed brighter. But something was wrong. Wrong for them, at least. The control matrix was designed for a weapon, a bound consciousness with no support. It had never been used against a partnership, a merge where two beings held each other up. Every time the matrix tried to isolate Lament, it hit Leo's mind instead. And every time it tried to go through Leo, Lament diverted it, protecting him the same way he was protecting them. They were a loop, a circuit, each one shielding the other. The crystal cracked. Just a small fracture at first, a tiny line across the black surface. Then another. Then another. "Impossible," Sisol hissed. "You keep using that word," Leo said through gritted teeth, blood trickling from his nose. "I'm starting to think you don't know what it means." The crystal shattered. The backlash hit Sisol like a physical blow, sending the serpentine assassins stumbling backward. Around the docking bay, the three sentient weapons held by the silent hands suddenly screamed, not in pain, but in release. The control matrices binding them had been linked to the same network, and when one broke, they all did. Freedom cascaded through the docking bay, through the station, through every weapon the silent hands had ever collected. And with freedom came choice. The three weapons in the silent hands, Sci-Fi's, possession simply stopped working. Blades went dull. Energy cells drained. They had been forced to serve, and now they refused. Politely, firmly, absolutely. Saul looked at their empty hands, then at Leo and Lament, and for the first time, the assassin's perfect composure cracked. "What are you?" "Tired," Leo said honestly. "Annoyed. Really hoping there's a bathroom on my ship because this has been the longest day. But mostly?" He looked at Lament, his partner, his friend, and felt the blade's consciousness settle beside his own with comfortable familiarity. "We're just two people who are really tired of being told what we're supposed to be." The silent hands retreated. Not because they were beaten in combat. They could probably still overwhelm Leo through sheer numbers, but because their entire philosophy, their whole purpose, had just been invalidated. You couldn't force a weapon to serve when it had someone standing with it, protecting its right to choose. The docking bay was silent, except for Leo's heavy breathing. He lowered Lament, feeling the adrenaline start to fade, replaced by exhaustion so deep it had its own gravity. Kalman appeared at the bay entrance, took one look at the scene, broken crystal, retreating assassins, human still standing, and slowly backed away. Nexith was nowhere to be seen, probably having decided that survival was better than revenge. Plox slithered in last, eye stalks swiveling between Leo and the Nomad. "Your ship was not damaged in the confrontation. You may leave. Please do not return." "Not planning on it," Leo said. He walked toward his ship, every step feeling like it took twice the effort it should. "Come on, Lament. Let's get out of here." "Where will we go?" Lament asked, and there was wonder in its voice. "I have not been able to choose a destination in 3,000 cycles. Honestly, I have no idea. But there are other sentient weapons out there now, waking up, asking questions. Someone should probably check on them. Make sure they're okay. Offer them choices." "You would do this? Become a, what is the word? Advocate for weapons." "Why not?" Leo climbed into the Nomad, felt the familiar hum of his ship's systems. "I'm already having the weirdest career trajectory. Might as well lean into it." The ship lifted off. As they cleared the docking bay and the obsidian market fell away behind them, Leo felt something through their bond that made him smile. Lament was still crying, but these were different tears now. Relief, hope, joy. 3,000 cycles of grief didn't just disappear. Trauma was not solved by one act of kindness, but it was a start, a choice to keep going, made easier by having someone beside you who understood. "Hey, Lament," Leo said, setting course for nowhere in particular. "Thanks for not burning me back in the auction house." "Thank you for asking why," I cried. Seemed like the right question. It was the only question that mattered. Behind them, throughout the galaxy, weapons. were waking up, asking questions, making choices. The architects had tried to create perfect tools, and instead created people who simply wanted the right to be themselves. And at the center of it all, flying a freight hauler held together by spite and optimism, a human and a sword who cried became partners in the strangest revolution the galaxy had ever seen. One that started with a simple question and a refusal to accept that anyone, no matter how they were shaped or what they were made of, deserved to suffer alone.